So do you feel like your maintenance costs are being sucked into a black hole and you have no insights into them? Well, what if I told you that there was a way you could increase contract labor documentation by up to 300% in a cost-effective manner, which would then allow you to better track your costs in terms of where you're being efficient and inefficient with your field cash? If that sounds interesting, stay tuned. We've got a good one for you coming right up. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The State of the Field. I'm your host, Shravan Kamdar. Today, we'll be talking about operations and maintenance, and the communication and handoff gaps that we often see between the two groups, the people involved, the lack of transparency, the inefficiencies, the cost of those inefficiencies, and as well as the commonly attempted solutions that are often put in place, but end up kind of being band-aids to fix these issues. Finally, we'll also cover a success story from the field that shows us how to overcome some of these challenges. So let's get started. So what is the current state of the field? Let's take a look. So there's 5 key people in this story. First, we have Manny, the lease operator. His job is to go around the field checking on everything and report any issues, repairs that may need to be fixed as he goes about his routine business in the field. Second, we have Dave, the foreman or the dispatcher, who helps coordinate all the support that Manny needs to get his assets repaired. Then we have Terry, the technician, who works for the company and is able to resolve certain things on his own, which he may not need a vendor specialist support for. Finally, we have our vendors. We have Veronica, the vendor dispatcher, who is the dispatcher on the vendor's side, who Dave, the foreman or the dispatcher on the company side would have to work with in order to coordinate repairs with outside vendors, in this case, Veronica's company. And finally, we have Vince, who's one of the crew leads at Veronica's company, who's actually in the field and would be helping Terry or Manny complete tasks that they would need support for. So how does everyone work in the field? Well, when it comes to maintenance, field folks like Manny, Terry, and Vince, they probably got tons of little notes they keep to remind them about whatever business processes it is that they need to kick off to get a given maintenance item completed. So let's take a look at a typical workflow. Say Manny finds a broken lube oil pump on a compressor in the field. He sends an email to Dave to get support on it. Dave sends the note to Terry to take a look. Terry responds saying, "Hey Dave, I can't do this. I need a specialist to help me." Dave then passes the note to Veronica to get a specialist out. Veronica communicates to Vince to dispatch him and his crew to the compressor. She then responds to Dave saying a crew is on the way. Dave lets Manny know, and Manny calls Terry to confirm that the compressor fix is done properly. Once Terry confirms with Manny, Manny can then confirm with Dave as well. In addition to email, the crew can also use radios, cell phone calls, and text messages as well. Now, regardless of the communication method used, the likelihood of success in capturing all the relevant details in some organized, systematic manner can be calculated to be approximately, you guessed it, 0%. Some companies may gamble and bring in an expensive enterprise asset management system or CMMS like SAP, Oracle, Infor, etc., which frankly are great back office systems, but the field will usually see this and be like, no thanks. And adoption remains low at best. At this point, companies often get desperate and turn to point solutions like access databases, Excel files, custom mobile or web apps, or even a Dynamics 365 platform with some custom Power Apps built on it. At the same time, the field is burdened with so much cognitive load just to get administrative work done on solutions not designed for the field. And so now not only is adoption low across the board, but less work is getting done. Wow, so if we had like a football analogy to this would be like a quarterback who didn't know when to pass, run, hand off, or take a knee. Or like a lineman on a line who wouldn't know the quarterback's blind side, what the defense was going to do in terms of blitz or not, or heck, even how they should line up, whether it was for a field goal, a kick return, a punt, or a normal offensive play. Meanwhile, it would be like the wide receivers and running backs not knowing what routes to run or when to run block or pass block. All the while, coaches and coordinators keep drawing up playbook after playbook hoping something different will happen instead of figuring out how to get the entire team on the same page. So that brings us to, you guessed it, our WJOYN plug alert, where we tell you how we at W Energy use our JOYN platform to solve problems like this. So let's check out today's case study. All right, so today's success story is about a company headquartered in Denver. They operate in Midland and South Texas. They make about 154,000 barrels per day. They had a need to increase transparency, specifically as it related to their contract labor, so that they could help reduce some of their OPEX inefficiencies. So before we go to the solution, let's take a look at the legacy software that this company was using. What were some of the symptoms of inefficiency that they were noticing? So here's some quotes that we got for the legacy software that they used to have. Number one, it was described as cumbersome. Number two, it was described as very difficult to use. And here's some other ones, word for word, like getting to an asset required drilling all the way down. And then to get back out, you had to drill all the way back up. And this was very annoying to some users. Another example was just something as simple as attaching documents. That was very hard. The system would never remember where you'd attach them from, so you'd always have to dig around all your folders to figure that out. And there were many other such problems like this that focused around very basic usability. So what were some of the underlying causes of those symptoms, right? Underlying causes of those inefficiencies that we're seeing. So what we heard here was that the mobile app on this legacy system was very underdeveloped. It had a very slow desktop application. It was customized for the South Texas business unit. So, from a company standpoint, it wasn't really working for the Midland business unit. And finally, I think the biggest piece of this was that none of the vendors had access to this system, and it wasn't really set up to get access for vendors either. So you were leaving out a very large portion of your support group, which added up to a very large portion of your bottom line OPEX expenditures. So if you didn't have transparency into your contracted labor, sort of defeats the purpose of making your OPEX OPEX efficient when you don't have transparency into the guys doing the work for you, right? So we looked at the symptoms, we looked at some of the underlying causes. Now, what were the business impacts of this inefficiency? Well, number one, obviously we had low adoption of the system, which led to only about 20 to 30% of all of your contracted labor being documented in any systematic manner. And overall, this just lacked accountability, right? Everything was lost in emails or phone calls or text messages or little paper notes, things of that nature. Just like we saw in the pictorial diagrams earlier. Okay, so what was the story of how this customer moved all of their maintenance to JOYN? So again, this was specific to their Midland business unit. They were already using the system for operations, and one of their maintenance foremen had heard about the system. So he had a login. He logged in one fine day and just started playing around, completely self-service. And he was able to create tasks on his own. And then he just spoke to his operations foreman that was his counterpart on the ops side and showed him what he wanted to do. They figured out a quick business workflow between maintenance and operations that worked for both of them. And they started, creating all the tasks that they would need for whatever support operations needed from maintenance. The biggest part was when maintenance was able to add all of their vendors into the system and get them trained within a matter of, a couple hours or a few days, a couple hours a vendor, a few days for most of their vendors, and then they just kept adding them. But getting the vendors into the system was key to that transparency that they were looking for. Eventually, they added all their vendors, they moved all their tasks in, and within a year, they had moved over 95% of all of their maintenance support work from all of their legacy systems into JOYN. So let's take a look at what the state of the field is like now for this company. So first, we'll go to Manny in the field, who's going to enter a work order for a lube oil pump leak that he found on a compressor. Once he's done entering the work order, he can see it as a draft on his phone and watch the status update as Dave works on it. Now here, Dave can see the task submitted by Manny. He'll now decide whether he wants to give it directly to Vince, the vendor crew lead, or whether he wants to work it through Veronica, the vendor dispatcher. He decides to go through Veronica since it's a busy day for the crew, and she's more aware of what other work Vince's crew may have going on. Meanwhile, Manny can see the updates on his phone. Veronica then figures out the right time to assign it to Vince and his crew. Vince receives the task on his mobile phone and accepts it. He then proceeds to complete the repair on the compressor and takes a picture and attaches the picture of the repair to the task. He then comments that the repair has been completed and then proceeds to resolve the task and input the time that he spent doing the task. The company has an automatic internal verification task to verify the vendor's work. Dave assigns this task to Terry the technician. Notice that Veronica cannot see this task since she can only see items assigned to the vendor company that she works for. Therefore, she continues to only see the one task assigned to Vince, the crew lead. Terry the technician sees the task come in on his mobile phone. He then proceeds to look at the linked task of the work order that Vince had completed and sees that it is resolved and looks at the details of what Vince did. He takes a look at the picture that Vince took. He then moves back to his own task to verify the repair. He accepts the task and proceeds to verify the actual repair in the field. He takes his own picture of the repair as well. He then puts in a comment about the verification being completed and then proceeds to resolve the task. Once Terry's done, Dave can see the update on the task on his computer as well as review the pictures of the repair. Okay, so that was the visual demo overview. Now let's take a look at how they described success once they actually got there. Okay, so now after moving to JOYN, let's move from the symptoms of inefficiency to what do the signs of success look like. Well, we asked some of the users, what they felt the difference was. Well, they said, the words used to describe JOYN were things like intuitive, simple, things like entering tasks, completing them, filling out forms. It's all very simple and user-friendly. Okay, so what are the underlying causes of this success, right? Instead of the underlying causes of inefficiency. So, we had the immature mobile app and the slow desktop application before. Here we saw comments like it's a native, mature mobile application. The web-based application is very quick. The self-serve part is very easy. It's easy to configure specifically for their middle and business unit, whereas they couldn't do that with their legacy system. Okay, so what did the business impact of this success sound like, right? Number one, they had high adoption, which led them to actually use the software, but what did that lead to? Well, immediately right off the bat, they had a 200% increase in the amount of contract labor that was being documented. Eventually, that rose up to 80 to 90% of all contract labor, which was an overall increase of about 300 to 400%. And then just in general, the amount of tasks that were being documented in general went up. Beyond that, everybody across the board had higher accountability, and there was nothing lost or getting lost in unstructured communication like texts, emails, etc. So keep in mind here is that first and foremost, the story and the success here is about the smart people in the field who simply took stock of the situation at hand, were able to see through all the mud in a very clear manner with a very clear perspective of how they wanted to move forward. And then they realized that to move forward in the way that they wanted to in a sustainable manner, they had to have operations and maintenance on the same page. Then they simply leveraged the technology in the right way as an enabler to allow them to do what they already did, but just in a way more efficient manner. Well, that was our episode on the state of the field for today. If you have any questions on what you saw, whether it's about the customer, the case study, or JOYN itself, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Also, if you like what you saw and you want to see more, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Until then, see you next time.